In this video, you're going to learn about NgRx Signals, which is the new fancy way of managing state reactively across your application. By the end of this video, you will have this whole application created working with NgRx Signal. You will be able to add some tasks just like this. You will be able to mark them as done, and you will be able to see the count right here of completed versus total. And you will also be able to filter these tasks by their statuses. And the best part is that all of this will be saved permanently in the local storage. So if I refresh the application, I will still be able to see them. Hey everyone, my name is Mohammed Ahsan. I'm a Google developers expert in Angular and I've been doing programming for more than 10 years. And my job here on YouTube is to teach you Angular in the best way possible so you can write efficient, scalable and robust code. With that said, let's get into it. As I mentioned, we are going to be using NgRx Signals, but a quick shameless plug. This particular application that you see right here is part of the Angular Cookbook 2nd edition's code repository. So we are going to use the same code repository because this is open source, but we are not going to follow any recipe from the book, but rather something new. And the book can be found in the description of this video as well. And you can see that there are about 11 ratings with 4.1. So people actually like it quite a lot. Now, having said that, let's jump into the code. Once you have cloned the repository, you will see that we have a bunch of folders here, but first you need to run npm install. This will run npm install in the code repository, the workspace, but then also into the final and start folder. The book is written in a way that we have the start state of all the application and then we have the final state right here. We're going to start working with the start state. If you go to start and then apps and then chapter 1, you will find the NgRx Signals. This is the application that we want to work with, and this is the folder we are going to work with. And in order to just run this application, all you need to do is go here and run npm run serve NgRx Signals, and it's going to start the start state of the application. Upon running it, you should be able to see a new tab in your browser, and you can see that this is running on localhost 4200. Now you can see that we have this application, but nothing actually works. If I type something, click add, nothing works. If I toggle this, nothing works, and none of the filters work as well. This is because we are going to start working on those. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to open a new terminal, and I'm going to cd into the start folder. So let's do cd start, and then we are going to copy the command for installing NgRx Signals. So we're going to go to NgRx Signals and in the installation, and here we're just going to copy the second command with npm. So let's copy this. Now we are going to go and in our terminal, when we are in the start folder, we are going to just run npm install NgRx Signals, and we can just install this within our package, and we can install this into our project. Now that we have the package installed, we can start working in the app. So if you go to source app, we're going to create a folder here. So let's call this store because we are going to create an NgRx store. And inside here, we're going to create two files. We're going to call this todos.model.ts. This is where we will define what a to-do looks like. And then inside here, we are also going to create todos.store.ts. Now first we can define the to-do model. So here we can go ahead and say export type to-do item. And here we're going to say a to-do contains an ID, which is going to be of type string. We also will have a title of type string, and then we'll have a completed property, which is going to be of type boolean. So let's save this. Now we are going to the store file and we are going to create the signal store. So here we can start saying export const to-do store, and here we are going to use the signal store method, and we are going to import it from NgRx Signals. So let's do import from, and here we can say NgRx/signals. Now we can say signal store here. So we are actually bringing this one here. And now let's define what our store looks like. So first of all, we are going to say type, and here we can say to-do state. The state in our store will look like this. We'll have a to-dos array. So this is going to be a to-do item array. Notice that we have imported the to-do item from to-dos model. Now the state object in our applications is what basically contains any data which our application uses, and our application is basically based on the to-dos. So if we go back to our application, all we need is a bunch of to-dos and everything else is going to be derived from it. So now that we have the type of the state, we need to initialize it with a variable or the initial state object. So here we can say const initial state, and this is going to be of type todos state, and here we can go ahead and give this an object, and here we can define that todos are going to be an empty array initially. Now this initial state is something that signal store needs because it needs to know what is going to be the value of this whole state that we have initially. For this we use something called withState from NgRx Signals, and you import this and you provide the initial state within it, and that's pretty much it. Now we have a state and actually a store that has a state initialized. Now, if I go to my app component, you will see that in the TypeScript file, we have a list of tasks. We don't really need that because we want everything to be rendered from the store. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this and go to store here, and I'm going to paste it right here. But I will change some information because it also needs ID. So we can say ID is going to be 1 here, and then the ID here is going to be, for example, 2. Now I will change this to just prefix it with S just to show you that this is coming from the Signal store. So I'm going to save this now, but we are going to remove this pretty soon. So I'm going to go to my app component TS and remove this from here. Now our template would start crying because it doesn't know what tasks is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to now inject our store. So here we can quickly go and say our store is basically this to-dos store, which we are going to inject. So here we are going to say to-do store. And now we have a store object, which basically contains the state, and the state has a to-dos signal. Since we are using NgRx Signals, of course, every property that we are going to use is going to be a signal, which is recently introduced in Angular. So now that we save this, we can quickly go to HTML, and here we can, instead of tasks, here we can say store dot to-dos, because that's the name of our array. Now if we save this and go back to our application, we can refresh, and for some reason my application crashed, so I need to restart the server. So I'm going to go to my server, and here let's see if anything has gone wrong. Yes, my server basically crashed. So here we can go quickly and say npm run serve ngCC signals, and now when we refresh our application, you can see that it's a bit better, but it's not what we expected. So we have a white screen. And if we go to our debugger, you can see that it will say that there is no provider for Signal store. And that is actually correct. We have not provided our store anywhere, but we are using that inside our app component. So what does that mean? We have created a store, which is a Signal store, but none of our files actually know about it, apart from the fact that we are trying to inject it. And if we are injecting something, Angular has to know about it beforehand. So we have two options. One, we can provide it right inside the app component. Other option is we can just say that this store is provided in the root, which is the most common option. So if we want to just provide a Signal store inside our component only, it's much better to provide it right here in the component metadata. Otherwise, we can just say provide to root. I can just provide this inside the root. So every component basically has the access to it. So I'm going to go to store TS, and here just before with state, I'm going to add another line, a line of configuration. So here we can say something like an object, and here we're going to just use provided in, and you can see that I can provide the value root here. So I can just say root. Now if we save this, you can see our application starts to work just fine. So if I open this, you can see that we are now showing the to-dos from the store, the NgRx store. This is amazing. So the next thing that we want to do is to add some to-dos. And for that, we need to use something called methods. So here we can say withMethods, and this essentially allows us to pass a factory method, which means that this will take a function and then it will return some value from it. So here we are going to return an object, and this function, this factory function, automatically gets the to-dos. So either we can say store here, or we can destructure them and say to-dos. So since we already know that we are going to have to-dos, we can just destructure this. And now from this one, we need to return the methods that we want to create. So obviously we need a method for add to do. So here we can say add to do is going to be a method, and this function, when it is going to be called, it is going to be called with the new to-dos title. So here you can say new to-do title, which is going to be of type string. And what this should do is it should create a new to-do inside the to-dos array, which we have right here, or you can say right here. So in this case, what we use is something called a patch state, and this comes with NgRx Signal. So whenever we need to update the state of our NgRx Signal store, we need to call the patch state. So this patch state takes two parameters. One is the store itself, and the second parameter is an object. Now you will notice that we don't really have the store right here. So in this particular case, it's better to not destructure it and just use store right here. The second argument here is what we want to update. So here we are going to say we need the to-dos here, and the to-dos will be everything that we have had before, but with a new to-do added to it. So we are going to have two things. One is something like here, and the second thing is here. What we want to do is to put our new to-do that we are providing at the top of it. So this is going to be an object. So we can quickly say something like an object, and here the object will have a title. So we are creating a new to do. So the title is going to be new to do title. Then we'll have an ID. We're going to just use an ID by doing date.now to_string, and then we'll have a completed, which by default is going to be false because we are just creating a to-do. Now, the second thing here is going to be all previous to-dos that we already had. So here we can say ... store .todos, which means all existing to-dos will come after. So we'll have everything that we had before, but a new to-do added to the top. And that's pretty much it. Now that we have this function, let's try to call it. In our app component HTML, if we go here, you can see that we have an input and we also have a button. We're going to change this div to a form so we can use the form submission here. And here we're going to call this required so we get the default behavior of the browser. So here we are going to call required true, or you can just say required. That's pretty much fine. Now this button is going to be of type submit. And what we want to do is on submit. So for this, we can use NgSubmit as the handler. And then we want to call a function here. Now I could call the stores function right here, but I want to actually do two things here. One, I want to add a new to do, but I also want to sort of reset this form as well. That's why I'm going to create a function right here in my component. So here I can say, for example, submit new to do. This is going to basically get the value of the to-do item. So for this, we are also going to create a variable, but let's create the function first. Now, when we submit a new to-do, we are going to call this submit to-do here, submit new to-do, and this submit new to-do will somehow access the value of this input. Now, since this is a really small form, I want to just use the simple form component or form module, or I could have used just a template variable, but I want to use the forms module here. So what you can do is inside the imports, you can also add a forms module, and you're going to import this from Angular Common Forms or Angular Forms. So here we can say import from @Angular/forms, and we are going to import the forms module from here. Now that we have the forms module here, we can go ahead and say in my HTML that this input has an ng model. So here I can say ng model, and this requires a variable. So I'm going to create a signal for this. So I can go here and say, for example, new to do title, and here I can create a signal, and the signal directly comes from Angular core. So this is going to be of type string. Now what I can do is I can go to my HTML and assign to it. So new to do title. And now that we have this, I can just save this, go to my component and write the logic of the submit new to do. Now in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to be able to submit based on the new value. But just to make this a bit nicer, what I can do is here I can say this dot store dot add to do, and we are going to pass the value of the new to do title. So here we can say new to do title. So we are passing the value from here. And once that's done, I also want to reset the input as well. But let's try this for now. Now that we have this here, I can quickly go and say new to do. And if I hit add, you can see that automatically it came here, but it did not work. Why? Let's look at the debugger, and I know why. We forgot to put a name attribute. So here you can see that when we are using ng model, within the form tag, we need to use the name attribute. So we need to go to our HTML, and here we can say the name of this one is new to do input, for example. Now when we try the same thing, it should work. So if I go here and say new to do, and hit add, you can see that the new to do automatically goes into the store and appears here right away. However, the input is not emptied, and we want to do that. So we go to our function, and in here, I also want to empty it afterwards. So here we can say this dot new to do title dot set, and here we can set it to empty string right away. Now let's try this. I say new to do, and if I hit add, you can see that the input is emptied and we have a new value here. But can I submit just like this? Yes, I can, and I should not be able to. So I can go to my HTML, and here I will disable this button. So I can say button disabled, and here we can say if the new to do title doesn't have a value with a not sign, then we want to disable it. Now if I go here, you can see that I cannot submit. I only can do new to do, and then I can submit. Now this is doing pretty well. Now you would also notice that the required here does nothing because we are using NgSubmit and not submit. That's why it doesn't really work. So I can remove the required from here as well, since we are handling it ourselves. Now that we have a new to do created, we can go to our store and remove the initial to dos because we don't really want them. So I can just remove these for now. Now you can see that when we refresh our application, we don't have any to dos, and then we can just add them like this, and they work just fine. Now what I also want to do is to be able to toggle these to-dos as well. So when we mark them or click them, they should be strike through'd, so we see that they are done. Now for this one, we want to go to our store and create a new method inside to toggle a to-do. Here we can say toggle to-do. In this, we are going to get a to-do ID. which is going to be of type string. And then we are going to do the patch state just like this. We are going to pass store, and then we are going to update the to-dos. So here we can say to-dos are going to be, and now we are going to map over all the to-dos, and just the to-do with the to-do ID is going to have its completed attribute switched or flipped. So here we can say store.todos. This is a signal, so I need to use parenthesis. And here I'm going to use map. So here we are going to use map. Now we are going to say each to-do item is going to work just like this. So here we are going to say if the to-do item dot ID matches the to-do ID, then I want to return the same to-do. So I'm going to destructure the to-do here, so to-do item, but I'm going to change the completed property by flipping it. So I'm going to say not to-do item dot completed. So if it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true. Now, since we have this one done here, if the to-do items ID does not match our target, then we just need to return the to-do item as it is. No change required here. Now this should work just fine. So now if I save this and go to my app component HTML, you can see that we have a UL and an li. So on each list item, I can put a click here. And the click can directly call a method from store. So here we can say store dot toggle to do. And in the toggle to do, I'm going to pass the ID of the task. So here we have the variable task, which is being rendered. So you can say task dot ID. And that's pretty much it. If I save this now and go back to my app, let's say add a new to do, just like this, test one. And if I click this, you can see that we are now able to toggle this just like this. No problems at all. And I can toggle this just like this. Great. So now we have added two methods, one for adding and one for toggling. Now the next thing I want to do is to be able to show how many of the to-dos have been completed. Now what should we do here? The beauty of NgRx Signal store is that I can handle this within the store itself. And for that, we need to use the third concept. So far we have discussed with state and with methods. Now we'll also use something called withComputed. So here you can use withComputed, and this also takes a factory function and returns an object. So this factory function here gets the store just like the withMethods, but we can also destructure it as well. So put a comma here. Now what we need to return is each computed property. So I need to show how many completed items are here against the total numbers. So if we just talk about the total numbers, I could easily just go into app component HTML here, and where we are showing this 0, the second 0, I can use here store dot todos, which is a signal dot length. And if I save this, you should be able to see that when we add to-dos, this number increases. So I can add this, and the number keeps increasing. Now, when we mark something, this number does not get changed. And this is what we are creating a computed property for. So I'm going to go to my store here, and here the first property is going to be completed to-dos. And here we can say this is going to be a computed property. Now, this computed comes directly from Angular core. And I think NgRx team is pretty smart to just use what comes from Angular because they don't have to abstract it. Now, the computed here takes a function and returns what we want to return. So here we want to say store dot todos, which is a signal dot, and here we can filter it, right? Now, in some places you will see that in withComputed, we don't really use store quite a lot. So they also use something like destructuring the to-dos right here. And that's also possible. So you don't have to write store dot all the time. So here we can say todos dot filter, and this can take a function. So let's say we are filtering on each to-do item. What should it filter on? So we are going to return only the to-do item which have completed set to true. And that's how we can get the completed to-dos. Now, if we just wanted completed to-dos length, you could also just rename this length. And after we have this filter done, you can just return the length from here, and this completed to-dos length becomes a signal of number. That's also possible. But I'm going to just make it complete to-dos. So we have an array of to-do items, and I can take out the length from it. So I'm going to save this now and go to app.component.html. And here with the first 0, I can go ahead and say store dot completed to-dos, which is a signal dot length. Now, if I save this, go to my application, add a new to-do, you can see that we have 0/1. If I add another one, now if I mark any of them, you can see that the value here changes. So I can click this and you can say 2 out of 2. So this is cool. This is working as expected. And the beauty is that I do not have to manage all of it at all. The computed property in our store gets recomputed anytime the to-dos changes. So if you add one more, if you toggle anything, if you do any changes with the to-dos, this completed to-dos properties will be computed again. And the good part here is that since all of this uses signals, you don't have to worry about performance because it's the signal who's telling Angular that something has changed and it needs to re-render stuff. So that's pretty performant by design. Now that we have this done, the next thing I want to do is to be able to filter our to-dos based on the filter applied from here. Right now you'll see that all active completed does nothing. What should happen is that if I have active selected, it should show me the non-completed or the incompleted task. If I've completed, then it should show me the completed ones, and all should show basically all of them. So how do we manage that? The first thing that will change is instead of showing all the to-do here, we have to do a filtered to-dos list, and we also have to save the value of the applied filter somewhere as well. So we are going to create another property here, and we are going to call this filter. Now what we can do here is create a new type, and here we can say to-do filter, and the to-do filter will potentially have one of three values. So all, we could have active, and we could also have completed. Now this filter is going to be of type to-do filter, and the initial value in the state of this filter will be all because we want all of the to-dos to be shown by default. So we are going to put it just like this. Now that we have the filter set, we want to be able to change this filter whenever we click either of these buttons. So for this, we need to create another method. So we are going to go inside withMethods, and we're going to create a new filter called change filter. And this change filter is essentially going to take a filter as to-do filter, as you can see. So it can only have either of the three values that we mentioned, which is these. And then what it should do is just patch the state with the active store and then change the filter with the applied filter. So here you can call it new filter, blah, 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 but we are basically applying whatever comes here to the state. Now that we have this, we can quickly go into our component HTML, and here we can apply this right here. So here we can say click. Whenever this button is clicked, we want to call store dot change filter, and here we want to apply one of the three filters. So since this button is named all, we are going to pass the value here all. Similarly, we are going to copy paste this, and we are going to call this one active and the next one completed. Now that we have these, let's quickly go to the store and just put a console log before changing it, or after changing it, doesn't matter. So if I go here, I can say console log, and here we can say filter. So I'm just going to save this. Now if I open my debugger, and if I just go and click these buttons, you can see that the filter all is here. Then we have active, completed. So all of this seems to be working quite fine. Now what I want to do is I want to not show all the to-dos in my template. So here where we have UL and multiple list items, rendering the to-dos, basically all the to-dos. I don't want all the to-dos to be here. I want filtered to-dos to be here. So for this, I'm going to create another computed property. I'm going to go inside withComputed, and here I'm going to say this is going to be filtered to-dos, and this is going to be a computed as well. And here I'm going to put a switch. So I'm going to say switch based on the filter. So you can see we are already having in withComputed to-dos array, but here I can just say give me the filter as well. Now I can do a switch on the filter's value. So I can say filter. Since this is a signal, I'm going to use it like this. And now I can say if the case is that the value is completed, then we need to do this. So we are going to just return to-dos, and to-dos are going to have a filter, and the filter will basically return each to-do item which has the completed as true. So here we can quickly say return to-do item dot completed. So if it's true, it's just going to return this. Now we can also add another case. So here we can say case, this is going to be active, and this is just going to be the reverse of it. So I'm going to copy this and paste this here, and I'm just going to switch this to false. So if it's not completed, then we are going to send this as active. Otherwise, we just need to return the to-dos themselves. So that means the filter is all. So let's save this. Now if I go back to my application and say new to-do, let's say test2 and test3, you can see that if I click new to-do and mark it as done, if I click active, the filter is set to active, but we see still all of them. That is because we are not using filtered to-dos yet. So we need to go to app component HTML, and here we can change this to-dos to filtered to-dos, just like this. Let's save this and let's try this again. So new to-do, test2, test3. Now if I mark this one as done, click active, you can see that we only see the ones which are not done. If I click completed, only ones that are completed, and all means all of them are completed. Cool. So now we are able to filter the to-dos based on the active or the applied filter. Now that we have this, let's also show show them a bit differently. So we know which filter is applied at the moment. So for this, we are going to go to our app component HTML, and the button, we can say class dot ptn dash primary, since that's a class that I have that changes the look of the button. Here we can say if we have the store.filter equals to all. So if it's all, then it's going to be button primary. So let's save this. Now you can see that this is automatically changed, and if I refresh, you can see that this button is active. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy paste this to others as well, and now I can change this one to active and this one to completed. Now let's save this. Now if I go and change this to active, you can see that the active one is highlighted, and same goes with the completed one. So I can add some to-dos, but they will not be shown here because it's completed. So I'm going to click add. You can see that the count here increased. We go to all, and you can see now it shows correctly. And if I mark this as done, it still shows in all, but it does not show in active. It only shows in completed and all. So this works perfect. Now the next thing I want to do is to not lose my to-dos, because whenever I refresh the application after adding stuff, you can see that everything is removed. So for that, we need to use something called hooks. So we're going to go to our to-dos store, and we are going to add right after everything. So after withMethods, we are going to use something called withHooks. Now this provides us the possibility to add more hooks like ng-on-init, ng-on-destroy, but on a store level. So here I can go and say on-init, and you can see that on-init automatically gets the store right here. And what we can do here is that we can put certain things here. We can watch the state changes if we wanted. For example, here I could say watch state coming from NgRx Signal. And here, if you look at the signature of this, we basically provide the store here and then the watcher function. So here we can say store, and here we have a function that we can get the state in. So here we can say state, and here we can say console log, and here we can say state. Now let's save this. Now if I go to my application and if I go to console, you will see that we will have an object that shows us what is in the state. We have the filter and the to-dos. We can actually make this a bit simpler. So let's remove this object notation from the console log. So we actually see what we are talking about. The state right now is basically an array of to-dos and filter. If I add a new to-do, let's say test, click add, you will see that we have another object being printed here. And now this has the new to-do that we just added, test with this ID, completed false. And all of this is possible because we are using this watch state here. So as soon as our component has started, you can see that we can watch the state and do something with that. Now this is really helpful for keeping a history of the state. So you can do maybe undo or redo. But another thing that we can use instead of watch state is called an effect. So instead of the watch state here, you can actually say an effect which comes directly from Angular. And here we can give this a callback just like this. And what you can do here is that you can just copy this and paste it here. And in this effect, we don't really have the state, but we can get it. How can we get it? We can say const state equals, there is a method called getState, which comes from NgRx Signal, and this requires a store. And this is how we can get a state as well. Now, if we save this, let's see what would happen. If I refresh the application, you can see that we get this to-dos, which is from line 91, and then another one from line 88. So here, if you go here, you can see that this is the effect, and the other one is watch state. Now you might be thinking, why do we get the one in watch state before the effect? That is a really interesting question. The watch state essentially happens in the beginning of the store's creation. The effect will run whenever the value changes, but the effect does something called coalescing, or what it does is if multiple state changes happen within a short span of time, it will combine all of those and then call this function. So for example, if I go here and say store dot and I call add to do with some new values, for example, here we can say new item, and we can call this new item 1, and we can do the same thing a couple of times. So here this is going to be 2 and this is going to be 3. Now if I save this, I'm also going to put a sort of prefix here. So this is inside the effect, and this one is inside watch state. Now if I save this, let's go and see what happens. So here you will see that we got watch state with array 0, then we added 3 items. So all of them got logged. After that, only the last value got logged. So the effect will wait for some time before it actually shows you the callback. So this will contain the latest state instead of all the state changes. So if you want to keep a history of everything, you can basically have the watch state being called, but a more effective way would be using the effect because it waits for a while and combines the updates together. Cool. Now that we have this, we can actually remove the watch state because we don't really want this, and I don't like it so far. But what I'll do is I will use this effect to actually save my to-dos into the store. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a key at the top. So let's say we go here and we create a new const. So here we can say const to-do store key. And here we can call this ng cookbook to-dos. And now that we have the store here, we are going to remove watch state and we're going to go down and we're going to save this into local storage. And now we are going to say local storage dot set item, and here we are going to use the to-do store key, and the second argument is going to be a JSON dot stringify, but we are going to give the states to-dos here. So we can say state dot to-dos. Now notice that this to-dos here is not a signal. When we get the state, it gives us as a plain object and not a signal. So we can either use state dot to-dos, which we have gotten from the state, or we can do something like store dot to-dos, which is a signal. So this is going to give us an array. So I'm going to rather use the state dot to-dos just like this. And now we can save this. Now if I go to our application and add a bunch of to-dos, let's say new to-do and test1. And if I open my console here, I can go to application and I can go to local storage and I can see 4200 here. And here you should be able to see a couple of things, but I'm going to filter with to-dos. So here you can see that I have this ng cookbook to-dos, and this contains both of my to-dos that I've added. Now you can see them right here in the front end as well. But what if I refresh? If I refresh this, they're gone from here, but do they still exist inside the local storage? No, they don't. Because when we refresh the application, the state changes and it's set to an empty array because we are setting them right here in the empty array. And when we do that, the effect basically triggers and the effect essentially sets it back to empty string. What we need to do here is in on init, we also want to get the state and set it right away. So here we're going to say const to-dos from storage, and we're going to say json.parse. So we are going to parse either the data that's coming from local storage, or we're going to provide an empty string or an empty array. So here we can say local storage dot get item, and here we can give to do store key, or we can say something like this. So we have an empty array as a string. So it's going to parse either the local storage, or it will parse this, which will result in either the to-dos from the storage or an empty array. Now that we have the to-dos from storage, we can quickly go here and say patch state. We are going to pass the store here, and we are going to say the to-dos are going to be the to-dos from storage. There we go. Now let's save this. Now if I go to my application here, and let's say I add new to-do, and I also add test1 and save it, you can see that it actually came inside this particular local storage. And if I refresh now, you can see that we still have them, because now what happens is that when the store is initiated, it sets the value to empty array, but then immediately when ng on init or this on init hook is triggered, this gets the value from the storage and then also sets this, or basically sets it to the storage. Now these are two actions that happen very quickly, and so the effect waits for them, combines them, and gets the latest value from the state and saves that to the storage. If we did that in a watch state instead of an effect, I pretty much doubt that it's going to be empty. But let's try this now. So we're going to go to watch state, and here we're going to provide store, and here we are going to provide an array like this, and this one gets the to-do, so we can destructure them. Now I'm gonna put this entire code below, so let's save them, and I don't need this state here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly remove this, and I'm going to change this to just to-dos. But this to-dos is not a signal and an array, so I can just put it like this, and I have commented my effect right here. Let's save this. Before saving, you can see that we have to-dos right now. So if I save this now and refresh now, you can actually see that we have the data is still being preserved. And what that has to do is the sequence of what we have put here. If we move this down, let's see what happens. Now you can see that we don't have anything and we lost our to-dos. And that is because of the sequence. If the watch state is before and you're getting the data later from the storage, it is going to get triggered before even this is set, and you might lose your information. However, we can actually try this here. So if I add this, if I do test2 and refresh, you can see everything is gone. However, if I just comment this and open the effect, even if the effect is being used before and this later. Let's see what happens. So if I refresh this now, do test1, do new to do, and if I refresh, you can still see that we retain our to-dos and they are not gone because effect actually waits for things to happen and then waits a while before it actually triggers the callback. So I would recommend using effect most of the times unless you really want to get something right when the state is updated. All right, the last thing we need to do in this tutorial is whenever all of them are marked as done, I need to show a toast element or a snack bar congratulating the user. For this, we already have the snack bar component, which is right here, and all it needs is some message that it needs to show, and then we can use it right away. So what I'm going to do is first I need to import this snack bar into my app component. So I can go here, I can go into imports and say snack bar component. Then I can use this inside my template. So here I can say app snack bar, and this needs some content. So here we can say congratulations, you finished all the tasks, and let's save this. Now I just want to show this snack bar, and this component basically has a method called show, and this is what I need to call from the app component. So I can go to my app component here and first use this as a view child. So I can quickly go and say snack bar, and here we can say view child, and we can give the snack bar component just like this. Now let's save this, and now I should be able to access it. Now what I need to do is to be able to look into the store and the state changes and actually do something after it. But since everything is signal in the NgRx Signal store, I can just use an effect right from Angular. I don't even need to touch the store for this particular use case. So what I can do is I can go to constructor because we cannot really use an effect in an ng-on in it. So we are going to use effect from Angular right here, and we are going to give this a callback, and inside here we're going to write our logic. So here what I want to do is I want to say if we have our store and this dot store dot to-dos, if all of my to-dos are done, which means dot every is going to have each to-do item, and if each to-do item is done, which means to-do item dot completed. If that's the case, and you can actually extract this out into a variable, so you can say something like const all completed equals, and you can paste this just like this. And here we can say if all completed is actually true, then what we need to do is to do this dot snack bar, and this is a view child, but this gives us a signal. So if you see here, it's a signal. So we need to say this dot snack bar dot, and here we can say show. And you see here we get a question mark. That is because this snack bar is a signal of snack bar component or undefined, but we know that it's always going to be there. So we can actually say view child dot required. So it has to be there all the time, which means I don't really need to do this now. So if I save this and let's try to go to our code. Now I have some to-dos. I'm going to add test 2 and test 3. And now if I start marking them, you can see that once I marked all of them, we see this toast. Hey, I can click this and click this again. And you can see that this works because this is an effect and we are using a signal inside. Every time this to-dos is going to change, the effect is going to be triggered, or this callback is going to be triggered, which will basically show this snack bar, and that is what we wanted. So now we have a complete working application with NgRx Signal Store, which shows the count of completed, which works with the filters that we discussed about, which also shows a snack bar on completion of all of them, and saves everything in local storage, so I can just come back anytime and finish my to-dos that I started. And that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you learned a lot. You learned about the NgRx Signal Store and how to use them and how powerful that is combined with the computed methods, hooks. We discussed a lot of things. And just to mention this again, this is just like one of the recipes of more than 90 recipes within this particular book. So if you're interested in more Angular advanced stuff and want to learn about a bunch of topics that will polish your skills in Angular, I would recommend getting this book, and you will see the link in the description. I found great comments so far, so I can only recommend because I wrote this book. With that said, let me know in the comments, what do you want me to work on next, or if there's a particular topic about Angular that you want me to talk about. As always, happy coding. I'm going to see you in the next one.